This number is going to blow your mind. So right now, the guesstimate is 84 to 124 trillion dollars will be transferred from our generation to the next generation. So if that holds true, about $13 trillion will be donated to some charitable entity over the next decade. For everybody listening to this, if you want to know, the best predictor of future giving is the Standard and Poor's 500 index. In calendar year 2023, over 445 billion. I love saying billion came from individuals. So individual giving, that's the engine that fuels our charitable giving. So there's great research. Again, what motivates donors to make a gift, and then what turns them off.
Welcome to Nonprofit Docs. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Hardy. Our guest today is Mark Germano, who has raised over $750 million. That's right. That's $750 million for nonprofit organizations across the country. And he is here today to help you and your nonprofit weather the storm of the current economic uncertainty and the wild stock market. With over 40 years' experience through his consulting company and his extensive fundraising program, Money for Your Mission, he has worked with nonprofit professionals and boards just like you to achieve outstanding results. Mark has taught fundraising at the University of Notre Dame in the Master of Nonprofit Administration program. And frankly, he was my go-to professional for fundraising training when I was the Director of Nonprofit Certificate Education at Notre Dame. He holds not only a master's in psychology, he holds an MBA, and he's done extensive PhD research. We've known each other as friends and colleagues for more than 15 years. And he's not only an accomplished fundraising consultant and expert, but most importantly, he is a person of great integrity, someone I would trust my children and grandchildren with. So, Mark Germano, welcome to Nonprofit Docs.
Mark Hardy, thank you for such a gracious introduction. It is my honor to be with you, and I love this concept of nonprofit docs and helping our nonprofit community continue to bring hope to their community, because that's what we do. That's what we do. We're the people who take on all of the tough jobs. We help women and children who are fleeing violent situations. We help the inebriate get sober. We help those who have no faith to find their faith. That's what we do. We bring hope. So I'm delighted to be here, and congratulations on launching this. I think this is fantastic.
Well, thank you. We are out there trying to solve some of the most vexing problems in society. So we need as many resources as we can. Now, here's the issue right now. We're in the beginning of 2025, and we are in a state of economic uncertainty. We don't know what donors are going to do. We don't know what the government's going to do. We don't know what foundations are going to do. The stock market is going up 1,000 points, dropping 1,000 points. It's going back and forth. And so how do we buffer ourselves in this storm of uncertainty?
Great points, Mark. And you and I have been around for more than a few years. And so I want everybody who's listening to this and to step back for a moment, and let's look at a little longer history of the United States and charitable giving in the United States. So I'm a researcher by training, and so I like to look at the data. The best source of charitable giving data is a report out of the University of Indiana called Giving USA. It's published every June for the prior calendar year's giving. It's an excellent resource. And so I'm just going to ask you a trivia question, Mark. If you were to guess in calendar year 2023, when you consider individual giving, corporate giving, foundation giving, what do you think Americans gave in total in one calendar year? Just take a guess.
Okay. This is a little unfair because I'm familiar with Giving USA. It's a great publication. But the last time I looked at it, and it was probably a couple of years before what you're quoting, it was around 450 billion or something like that. But I'm not sure what it is now.
Right. So in calendar year 2023, ready for this? Everybody, I want you to buckle your seats. It was over $500 billion.
Wow.
$557 billion was given voluntarily. Nobody in the United States is forced to give anything. They
And this
do it
is from
because they want to.
corporations, foundations, individuals, the whole nine yards, right?
Right, and
Okay.
usually nonprofits think, oh, corporations and foundations, they must be given the most money. In fact, it's the opposite. Since 1956, when this data was first collected, individual giving has been about 87 to 90% of all charitable giving. So if you look at
Wow.
individual cash, credit cards, stock gifts, gifts from family foundations, gifts from planned gifts, or after somebody passes away, in calendar year 2023, that 557 billion, over 445 billion. I love saying billion came from individuals. So individual giving, that's the engine that fuels our charitable giving. If you want to know, the best predictor of future giving is the Standard and Poor's 500 index, the S&P 500. If you took statistics classes, it's almost a perfect positive correlation. So as the S&P goes up, individual charitable giving tends to go up. As it declines, what's interesting is charitable giving by Americans uncouples. So the S&P 500 could drop double digits, but individual giving doesn't drop as fast. So if you look at the last 15 years, we have been in a very, very robust economy. So from 2010 forward, the S&P 500 has averaged 12% growth per year. That's
Wow.
unbelievable, right?
Right.
And let's go back to bad old days, the second Great Depression of 2008, 2009. So in that 10-year section, we had the dot-com bust of
Mhm.
2001, things tanked. Then we had the second Great Depression of 2008, 2009, and the S&P 500 during that decade actually declined by 0.62%. But individual giving over that 10-year period averaged 4% growth per year. Now, if you look at these last 15 years, because the S&P 500 has been so strong, individual giving has averaged an increase of 5% per year. So if you go way back, if you go back 40 years and you look at American individual contributions to all nonprofits and communities of faith, it has averaged about 4.5 to 4.6% per year. So American philanthropy, American charitable giving is, I don't want to say it's immune from the economy, but we're very, very consistent. And my own personal theory is, this is just my theory, Mark, is that if you look at the founding of our country, when the Europeans came here, they didn't come here as exalted members of their community. We were kicked out of all of the good
Right.
countries in Europe. It was the Native Americans who showed us how to plant this thing called corn. And we are the first country in the world to have a national holiday for the blessings that God has given us, where we take a moment and we pause. It's in November. It's called Thanksgiving. It's not part of the NFL, even though Roger Goodell and the NFL would like it to be. But we pause on that day to give thanks for the things that we have been given and the things we share with each other. So if you look at our historical precedents, you know, we had to help each other. We didn't have any resources, and we were paupers or prisoners or religious zealots who got booted out of Europe And now, okay, now we're in the new world and we got to scratch out a living. And you can see it all throughout our country. In fact, there was a young man in the early mid 1800s. He was kind of a he was a kind of a ne'er-do-well in France, and I think if he was living today, he'd be like 28 years old, living in his basement, playing Xbox, and his parents just booted him out. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville, and he was sent over to America because his family was just like, oh man, you're irritating. So he stayed here and he traveled all across the United States, and he wrote a book called On Democracy, which is a wonderful little book, and he marveled at how willing we are to help one another. The Amish community, when a young man and woman get engaged, they build a barn and they start making quilts for the family. Whenever there's a fire, or we've seen these terrible tornadoes and wildfires and
We just
floods.
had one up here in the Amish community, destroyed a bunch of property, and the next day, the entire community was out there
Right,
rebuilding the barns and the homes, and
right,
they didn't ask for any government help. They just went out there and did it. Yeah, it's
right.
amazing. It's an amazing mentality that we take for granted
And,
because they
and,
don't
and
have
it,
this mentality in other countries, right?
No, 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 no. And it doesn't exist in European countries. By and large, it doesn't exist outside of the United States. Now, the closest is our good neighbors to the north, Canada. Canada was the second country in the world, but they didn't do it until about 100 years after America created Thanksgiving. They created their own Thanksgiving. We're the only two countries in the entire world that has a Thanksgiving Day. And the wildfires in California. So what happened?
Yeah.
Yes, the California firefighters were trying to put out the fire, but who was in right behind them? It was neighbors helping neighbors. It was people donating money, people bringing water. When we had those terrible fires on the Big Island of Maui or the Big Island of Hawaii, who helped? Who helped? Yes, the government resources came in, but who was there immediately? It was volunteers and donors giving of each other. That's our culture. That's built into us as Americans. And so for our listeners, if you're feeling uncertain, totally understand it. Absolutely, I share your uncertainty. But here's where I take comfort. If we look at the last 15 years of charitable giving, individual giving has been very strong. This is going to sound nerdy. I know it's nerdy, but if our viewers want to understand where charitable giving is going, look at the last year of the S&P 500. And for today's show, I looked at the last year for the S&P 500. And over the last year, the S&P 500 has gone up by 463 points. If you divide that number by 100, you get 4.63. And then you take that 4.63 and you multiply it times the average increase over the last 10 years, right? So without knowing anything else, no other piece of data, I can tell you that I believe in calendar year 2025, individual giving is going to go up $16.6 billion. B, 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 billion. So that's a
That's a lot of
huge,
money.
that's a lot of money. That's
Yeah.
huge. But in calendar year 2023, individuals in cash, credit card, stock gifts, online contributions, if you just look at that and you don't include planned giving or family foundations, if you look just at that section, that's $305 billion that was given in one calendar year. So 16 billion, that's a huge amount of money, but that works out to be about a 4%, 3%, 4% increase,
Something
right?
like that, yeah.
So something like so it won't be that
Mhm.
5%, but it's not going to go downward,
Yeah. Now,
probably.
let me ask you this because this is something that when I was getting my master's and PhD was a big deal. There was a lot of research in this area, and that was the transfer of wealth over the next 30 to 40 years. Traditionally, about 15% of the transfer wealth goes to charities. Now, there's a thing called the pledge. that was started, I think, by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. And they said, and they encouraged billionaires like themselves to give the lion's share of their wealth to charity or to start foundations, at least 50%. Some of them are saying 90, 99%, right? And are nonprofits prepared for this? Have we done the work to take advantage of this transfer?
All right, so now I want you to put on that 5 point. I don't want you to just put on your seatbelt. I want you to put on that 5 point harness because this number is going to blow your mind.
And the helmet. Yes.
And the helmet. And the helmet.
Okay.
So right now, the guesstimate is 84 to 124 trillion dollars will be transferred from our generation to the next generation. Let me say that again slowly.
Wow.
84 to 124 trillion dollars. Now, let's take the lower number. Let's go conservative, right? $84 trillion. And traditionally, donors about 15%, right?
Right.
So if that holds true, about $13 trillion.
Wow.
Yeah, right. That's a whole lot of zeros.
That's
right?
a whole lot of zeros, yeah.
About $13 trillion will be donated to some charitable entity over the next decade because you and I, we're kind of at the peak of the baby boom, right?
Right.
And I hope we are doing nonprofit docs for the next 20 years. But, we realistically, we got somewhere between 10 to 15 years on this planet Earth, right? So we're not talking about hundreds of years in the future. We're talking about like right now, going forward, because the front edge of the baby boomers, they're in their 80s and even early 90s. So we ain't going to be around a whole lot longer.
Right.
Unfortunately, most nonprofits have either no provision for planned giving in their organization, or they just get too intimidated. It's like, oh my God, planned gifts. Oh, somebody talks about a charitable remainder unit trust, and it's too confusing. You know what, friends, please, in the nonprofit world, in the communities of faith, keep it simple, right? Over 75% of planned gifts are very simple statements in the will or the estate plan. And my wife and I, we just completed our, end of life plan, and we have in our estate plan, very simple statement. I, Mark Germano, upon my death, expect the distribution of my assets. We have 3 children, so we're going to distribute it 30, 30, 30. That leaves 10%. Mark Germano gets 5, Martha Germano gets 5. We intend to donate X percent, and then we've identified our charitable organizations. Simple, easy to do. Any nonprofit organization can have that language. They could give it to their good donors saying, as you consider it. And here's the other thing that's really interesting. Back when I had brown hair, which was, a while ago, we really wouldn't talk to a donor about an estate gift or a planned gift probably until they were in their late 50s or 60s. Now, the most recent research from Giving USA on planned giving, now donors who have charitable giving activity, they're making their estate plans in their 40s.
Wow.
So, ladies and gentlemen, planned giving isn't just for the old geezers anymore, right? It's for the maybe newly parented, or maybe the kids are in their teens or whatever.
Well, people are becoming wealthy earlier now,
Right,
I mean, there's a lot of different ways to make money. And I think we should do a whole interview on planned giving. And our listeners that are listening to this, if you'd like us to do that, just put a comment below and let us know. And we're going to expand on that because I know you've got a lot of background in that. So basically, we have to position ourselves, and part of me is thinking, well, in order to take advantage of this tremendous transfer of wealth, we need to be building some relationships right now
Yes.
5, 10, 15 years down the road, then I think sometimes I think nonprofits only think in the next quarter what their fundraising
Yeah.
goal is, or for
Yeah.
that year, instead of the long-term strategy, which, and I know we're going to talk about relationship building later in another segment, but um, is that one issue that we have
Oh,
not
yeah.
dealt with well?
Yeah. So there's great research again. What motivates donors to make a gift, and then what turns them off. So let's talk about the positive, right? Well, now let's deal with the negative stuff. Here's what turns donors off. Number one, the only time they hear from the organization was when they're asked for money. Number two, they feel no connection to their gift and the impact it's creating. So they don't understand. I gave you $100. What did that do? I gave you 1,000. You know, what's different, right? And number three, they're asked too often. So, yes, they make their end of year annual gift. It's after Thanksgiving, it's before, the end of the year. They know that, okay, they sit down and say, oh, yeah, we got to send $100 here and $500 here. And they do that, right? And then guess what happens? Next year comes around, maybe they'll get a thank you email or text message, maybe, but the donor retention data ain't so good. And I'd love to talk about the importance of relationship building and retaining your donors, because right now the national average for retaining a donor from year to year is only 43%, meaning 57% of your donors, which you've worked your tail off to get in the door, 57% of them leave.
Those
That's a
are your
lot of money.
customers. I mean, it's a lot easier to keep a customer than
Yeah,
it is to find a new one. Right? And we're going to talk about that in segment three.
great.
We're really
Yeah,
going to expand on that
yeah,
because I think that relationship building and how you do it, and I think there's some myths out there that we need to explode, those kinds of things. Stay tuned if you are worried about federal, state, or other government funding cuts. In part two, Mark Germano helps us navigate the current government funding crisis. Click right here to watch that. Or if you want to know more about increasing your fundraising by building strong donor relationships, click here.